Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Lesley Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 50 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Lesley. If you have clutter and want to sort it out, this is the show for you. In today's episode, I am delighted to be talking to Nicki Munns from All Organised based in Kent, and we are going to be discussing downsizing. So Nicki is a specialist in all aspects of organising and decluttering, and we regularly see each other at the annual conference for professional organisers in London. Over the past few years, there's been a huge rise in the number of people wanting to downsize. So with her colleague Heidi, they offer specific downsizing services in partnership with the Senior Move Partnership. Nicki honed her people skills working in human resources for the European arm of an international accountancy firm before leaving to have her children and raise her family. Whilst raising her family, she pursued her love of home renovation and developed a slight obsession with Kevin McLeod and anything on the TV associated with derelict properties. Nicki and Heidi's company, All Organised, was formed over 8 years ago. A family member came over, visited Nicki from the States and told her all about her decision to change her career to become a professional organiser. And then Nicki thought that would be a great idea for her to pursue as well. And the rest, as they say, is history. So welcome, Nicki.
Hi, Lesley.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We wanted to talk about downsizing because it's so popular at the moment. We really are hearing about people downsizing and typically downsizing much younger than they used to. So what sort of things do you think are the main reasons why people are starting to downsize at the moment?
I think a lot of it's to do with the perception of the retirement developments themselves. A lot of them are almost like five-star hotels now, and the perception of it being an old people's retirement home doesn't really stand true anymore. I think they're looking to have a new chapter in their lives, easy to lock up and leave, go away on holiday, have a nice time, socialise, and less cleaning probably.
So it's definitely not that kind of, as you say, it's not that old people's retirement properties, because I know my dad's in a retirement property and people are moving in there from 55 now. So a lot of them are from 55 upwards, aren't they? I mean, some of them might even be younger than that. But I know the ones that are around here are definitely 55 plus. And so that's young. That's depressing because that's only 4 years away from me. But hey, I'm going to be downsizing soon. So yeah, no, it is. And people are wanting to sort of grasp life a little bit more and live a little. And you don't want to be sort of burdened down with your home, do you?
Absolutely. Yes. No, it's definitely a sea change in it. We're seeing, I think probably on last year, we've had about a 50% uplift on inquiries.
So the Senior Move Partnership then that you work in conjunction with, so you work for them, so they basically facilitate people downsizing, because it's a really difficult process, isn't it, to go down, because standard decluttering is difficult enough in itself. Moving house is difficult enough in itself. But when you've got to downsizing, you really have to pare down your belongings hugely, don't you? And it's a very different process, isn't it, than if there is such a thing as standard decluttering.
No, absolutely. The reason one of the reasons the Senior Move Partnership was set up was that quite often people want to relocate to be nearer to their children or other family members. And working as part of this fabulous team, we're actually able to cover a move from Scotland to Kent, which actually I'm doing in a couple of weeks' time. So my colleague in Scotland will help, and I'll help this end. So it actually provides a very rounded service.
So obviously you work for Senior Move Partnership, which is absolutely fantastic, but there are a lot of people who haven't got the benefit of working with a company like yours, and they have to go through that downsizing process themselves. So what sort of things do you typically do, and what sort of things would people need to look at in order to downsize themselves?
So what we do, we have quite an in-depth conversation when a new inquiry comes in, and it's key for us to actually identify the biggest areas of need and worry. So having done that, we have a good chat with the clients. They might say, I've got 5 outbuildings, but I don't know what to do, full of tools and garden equipment. They spend lives on allotments and growing things. Other clients it's just that, they can't deal with the actual thought of having to deal with the utilities companies or changing their TV provider over. So it's very personalised service. So, we fit in where the client needs us most.
Because it is an overwhelming job, isn't it? As we say, so moving house is overwhelming on its own. Decluttering is overwhelming on its own. And if you've got all those and and you're moving area as well, so you're going right out of your comfort zone, out from everything you've known. And a lot of people have, when they're downsizing, they've been in that family home for 30, 40, 50 years sometimes.
That's right, yeah. No, my longest client had been in for 70 years. He's actually stayed in his family home.
Yeah, and that's a huge wrench, isn't it? Because as well as the practical stuff that you need to do, there's the emotional journey that you need to go on. It's a big decision for people to make, to do that downsize. And I think a lot of people now, and certainly in my experience, they're wanting to make that decision for themselves rather than that decision be forced upon them. So they want to move into a retirement property while they're still able to do that, rather than when they need to for mobility issues or disability or whatever that might be.
No, I think it's a very good plan if you've got the foresight to do that. Some people do leave it too long, and it becomes really quite arduous then. I think a lot of people now are thinking one step ahead, and even though there's a lot to do, they see the benefits of actually doing it sooner rather than later when they're in reasonable health. They can still enjoy themselves.
I know, and there's some fabulous places out there, as you say. Some of them are like 5-star hotels, aren't they? It is that nice lock up and leave. It's very safe and very secure. Someone's doing your gardening for you quite often. There might be a warden in there that's helping you if you need to. There's so many benefits, isn't there, to moving into retirement communities. And there's a community as well. And that's not to be taken lightly. So obviously you do the practical side of things for downsizing. So specific to downsizing itself, what sort of things do you feel that people struggle with most?
For ladies, it's quite often the kitchen area because they've spent a lifetime cooking big family meals, doing big dinner parties and entertaining. So generally in retirement flats, apartments, the kitchens are that little bit smaller because they want to have all the mod cons there for their clients. So they've got washing machines and fridges and freezers, but it does cut down on the available cupboard space. So generally I spend quite a lot of time with my clients actually working out what will feasibly fit and encouraging them to use all their lovely china and crystal and not keep it for best. So, get rid of the chipped old stuff and use the pretty
So you think
things.
that's a good time. So that's something that you actively do. So people have been keeping these dinner services for a rainy day. And so rather than take the sort of chipped white china, you say, why don't we use this lovely Royal Doulton set? And so I know in my dad's property, the kitchen is tiny. I'm not going to lie, it's absolutely tiny. But so you just have to really pare down. And I think when you are downsizing, the decisions that you make are very different, aren't they, to standard decluttering, because you are forced into making decisions based on the space that you've got around you. So that's different to a lot of people who tend to move to the same size of house or something that's bigger.
Yes, I think so. And also, I think we're all guilty of that, especially in kitchens, that you see a new gadget and think, oh, I could use that. But, the practical nature of it is that sometimes we do only use those things once a year. And actually, do you really want to take it and jam up your cupboard space with it? It's working out what is practical. Because lots of ladies still bake and, make lots of cakes for their WIs. So if that's important and something they're still active in doing, then, we make the call that is what's important. Dialogue with the clients is key. Find out what's important to them, and then you make the rational decisions on their wishes.
Yeah, and there is going to need to be compromise in there, isn't there? So there's a chance, isn't there, in your new retirement property that you're not going to be doing the sort of inviting your whole family round for Sunday lunch or something like that you used to do. I'm not saying that you definitely can't do that, but that's probably going to be less likely than it was when you were sitting in a 4 or 5 bedroom house, the family home. And so it's almost that you have to close certain chapters of your life, I think, isn't it? And that can be very difficult for some people. To say goodbye to a part of your life that's made you really happy it's not an easy thing to do, is it?
No, it isn't. Lots of my clients are actually saying, when we're talking about if I'm going to entertain them all, I'll actually just take them down for lunch, because lots of the places have lovely restaurants now. So, they have drinks up in their apartments and then tootle off down to the restaurant. Everybody's got
better to me than cooking for 10 people, that's for sure. So quite often when I've worked with people that are downsizing myself, a lot of it is about the furniture that they've got.
That's right. That can be quite problematic because a lot of people actually can't visualise space and how their belongings will actually fit into a new home. So we've actually got software that we use, and we're able to put a plan together, and we go in and measure up the furniture, and we can drop it onto the plan. And it also gives us a 3D view if we need it. And then the client can see very easily if something's going to fit or not, because some of the time there's mobility issues and you don't want to leave 10 centimetres between the sharp edge of a table and a soft chair. So, it's to make sure the flow of the house actually works as well as, it physically fitting in.
Yeah, so now's definitely the time to look at that furniture and see whether it's the most sensible furniture for you to take with you, isn't it? So people themselves, actually, if they've not got, that's brilliant, to have kind of floor plans and you've got spatial awareness, which is fantastic. A lot of the time, the problem that we have as well is that retirement properties, kind of show homes, are staged, aren't they? And so they strip out the furniture and to make it look more spacious. And so if you're not somebody who's visually or spatially aware, you can struggle with that because it looks as if it's a really spacious room, but actually once you start putting your stuff in, it's even worse. And so we have to be mindful of that as well, don't we? So, but I guess you can, if you've not got this computer software, which would be really useful that you can use, you can just go make sure you measure your furniture, measure the depth of it so it doesn't come too far into the room. Maybe if you have got a 3-piece suite, think about just taking 2 chairs or just taking a sofa and 1 chair. So forfeiting some of the furniture along the way. And it's a hard decision, isn't it? Because people are very loath, aren't they, to split up 3-piece suites. But if that makes sense.
Most people are quite pragmatic about it. Sometimes I go into couples and offer the service and the wife will say to me, oh, no, we mustn't take that job away from my husband. He's really enjoying that. And they do it the old-fashioned way with a piece of graph paper. And to be honest, when we started doing it, that's what we did as well.
There's definitely other alternatives. I know in the retirement properties that I've worked in, they do have a kind of normally a great cupboard. So a lot of the furniture is built in, isn't it? And they tend to have these really nice, big kind of hall cupboards that look as if they're going to house everything and anything and everything. So what do you think about the storage that you typically see in retirement properties?
They change from development to development. I think most of the developers now are putting in, good storage. I'm always very honest with my client about what I feel will fit. So, I give them my best advice because it's not a magic cupboard. The walls don't expand. So, they're very handy and they provide good storage as long as people aren't realistic about what they can actually fit in them.
Yeah, and it is about that realism, and it's really about trying to, because quite often we keep things, don't we, from the past or for the future, in houses. And so it really is about living in the present, isn't it? And only having those things that are going to kind of serve your current life. And so you do have to be honest enough with yourself to sort of say goodbye to certain chapters of your life. Now's not the time to start keeping things for your family for the future. If they want those things, then they're going to have to take them now, aren't they?
No, exactly. I always think it's lovely if the family do want to take, possessions that are no longer needed, but also I think everyone should be mindful that your kids don't always want your stuff.
It is an interesting one because I think typically, older people, the quality of the stuff was great, wasn't it? And so it's hard to get rid of it. And so people have a kind of desire to pass that through generations. And often younger people just want to go to IKEA and have their own things, don't they? They don't want Royal Doulton dinner services and beautiful antiques. They might want to select one, but they'll be very select about what they do want and what they don't typically, won't they?
That's true. And I suppose honesty is always a good thing. Unfortunately, dark wood furniture has fallen from grace, but there's been a resurgence in 1960s, Urquhart and G-Plan, and that's selling quite well at the moment. And it's contemporary. That's what, the kids are actually liking, that sort of period. So, it really depends what the client has to dispose of. We quite often put them in touch with auction houses if we feel that it's appropriate. We've got quite a few local contacts and they're great with us. We can just bounce some pictures through to them and they'll come back with a yes or no, whether or not it's worth putting up for auction. So that's always a handy handy avenue.
So that's the kind of thing that you would do, just snap it on your phone, send a picture off as an attachment to a local auction house, and they'll soon tell you whether it's something that's saleable or not.
Exactly. I mean, my preferred option is always to donate to charity if we can. There's so many people that don't have very much and are, very grateful to have various things that people don't want anymore. So that's always my favourite avenue if the client's willing and able, and most of them are, to be honest.
And it can be a really positive thing, and it can, be quite inspiring, can't it, to give things away, especially if you've got a really great charity. One round here that I use quite regularly is a homeless charity that rehouses the homeless. And so it's always fantastic to be able to give your stuff away to them, because you know that it really is going to someone who absolutely needs it. In retirement properties as well, one of the things that you quite often lose is, well, pretty much always lose, I would say, is a loft space or a garage. So that's something that most people in retirement properties no longer have, that they may have had in their home before. So how do you go about discarding or decluttering the loft or garage space?
Okay, so lofts generally are storage spaces for things that we very, very rarely use. So generally an emotional attachment doesn't apply to the things that we've poked up there gathering dust. So generally, apart from things like photos that you might find in the loft, it's fairly easy for our clients to, say goodbye to whatever's up there. Garages are slightly more problematic because quite often the things that are in there are actually useful, so lawnmowers and garden equipment and tools. But we've got a great contact locally who is a chap that works for WorkAid, and he takes all manner of things for me: sewing machines, knitting machines, lawnmowers. We also contact our local men's sheds, and sometimes they come and collect wood, and just really depends what they need. But generally it isn't too much of a problem because the emotional attachment isn't quite there with that stuff, as opposed to the things that you find actually in the home.
So you mentioned a couple of charities there. Obviously this is a sort of, we've got people listening from all over the world, but I'm interested because I've not heard of either of those charities that you mentioned. So can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of things those charities do? So WorkAid and Men's Sheds.
Okay, so WorkAid is a fantastic organisation. They collect all sorts of things, and they make up packs. So if somebody was a seamstress, they give her a sewing machine and threads and some fabric, and it all goes on into containers and shipped overseas with volunteers who are engineers, electricians. And what they do, they go to these places and train up local people. And once they're trained, they're then presented with the kit so they can go and earn their living. So it's fantastic. It's based actually, I think, in the Midlands, but we've got a local contact who lives just down the road from me in Kent. So he stores it in his garage and then it all gets ferried up to the head office. And Men's Sheds they're sometimes affiliated with hospice shops, and they'll take various bits and pieces as they need them. So bits of wood, tools, drills. And I think lots of retired men go and work in the sheds, but I'm not entirely sure what they do.
You're just happy that Men's Sheds are taking all the stuff that you no longer want and it's going to a good home. You've not gone into the ins and outs of what they do in the men's sheds. Right, okay. Well, that's brilliant. I mean, I'm really interested in that. I mean, the WorkAid one sounds fantastic because there are certain things that things like sewing machines, if they are older, you think that they're not going to have a useful home. So sometimes they get recycled. But actually, if they're going overseas, then perhaps you can send older models. Would that be what you have seen?
Yes, I believe so, especially the old hands cranked ones. If they're going into the middle of Africa where there isn't really much power supply, then that's probably perfect. Because
useful. Thank you for mentioning those, Nicki. That's fab. So I think we've covered a lot of the things that you need to do when you are downsizing, the practicalities. So just to sort of recap on that, we really need to look at the furniture that we've got. We're probably going to have to, take that down by at least half or 2/3 even, aren't we? Or potentially buy new furniture that's going to fit better into the space. Look at the storage that's built in and be realistic with the amount of stuff that you've got and what's actually going to fit. And I guess in those lovely large hallway cupboards that they have often in retirement properties, we still do the standard decluttering things like containerize things and label things up, and so we know exactly what is in them, and everything's visible and accessible. Lofts and garages, I mean, I always find lofts and garages in some ways, even though they're very overwhelming to look at and to declutter, or the idea of it is, actually the reality is that it's quite straightforward, because a lot of those things that have found the way there you've already made a decision that you no longer want them in the home. So it's a bit of a dumping ground, or a bit of a procrastination on a decision. A lot of the things that are in there, you're not going to need. You're not going to need gardening equipment, because there's probably going to be a gardener or a handyman or somebody like that who's going to come and fix things outside and in the garden. Antiques wise, if you have got any valuables or antiques, you talked about photographing the item and sending it straight off to an antique house. So it's good to have those contacts before you get started on that, I think, isn't it? So you can do that as you go through. And then now's the time to pass things on to family members, but be realistic about whether or not they want them. And if they don't get upset about it. I think that's the thing as well. Because it can be quite hard, because you're dissecting and sort of taking down lots of aspects of your life, aren't you? And you want it to kind of rain on, don't you? You don't want to just say goodbye to those things. So, taking pictures, I guess, is really important while the home is still intact. Yeah, would you agree? Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Nicki, that's important?
It's like anything. It's a project. So if your projects plan well, it tends to make things a little bit easier along the way, getting things in place in the times they need to be done to ensure a smooth move.
Definitely. So Senior Move Partnership is a UK-based company. They're affiliated, I think, with NASM, which is an American company. Is that right? National Association of Senior Move Managers. Is that what it is? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, we fall under their umbrella. So everyone's fully insured. We abide by a code of ethics. We're dealing with vulnerable people, so it gives that sort of extra layer of comfort, really.
Of course it does. And I think it's fair to say that you and I are both professional organisers, and we have done that type of work with our own company as well. So if anybody wants help with a move, because it is daunting, particularly if you're on your own as well. If you're getting older and you're on your own, you've not got any children that can help you and things like that, it's really useful to reach out to professional organisers to get them to manage the process for you. So they'll take the stress away a little bit. Obviously it's a stressful move, but they will take that away, and they'll do a lot of the doing, do a lot of the thinking, a lot of the planning. And that's the kind of thing that's really overwhelming, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So we're very happy to take a call. We've got, lots of clients, might not necessarily progress to a job, but just ringing up saying, I've got this problem, thinking about moving, what do I do? So we take a call, and then if they feel they need extra help, obviously we're happy to go along and visit and assess their situation and needs.
And I bet it's really rewarding work, isn't it?
It's amazing. I've met such lovely, interesting people. I've learned so much since I've been doing it. Yeah, no, it's a lovely job.
And the nice thing is, if you're spending quite a lot of time with people, because you're going through the decluttering process and the move process, looking at their new house, thinking about furniture and things like that. It's lovely to be able to spend that much time with that amount of time with people, isn't it? So you can really get to know what makes them tick, what's important to them, and certain things that they have done in their lives.
No, absolutely. And actually, it's quite exciting as well. It's a new chapter, and I get very excited about it all. And I think, I hope that sometimes actually that rubs off. So when they're feeling a bit wobbly about it, I bounce and say, this is very exciting, new chapter, and make lots of new friends.
I know it really works well for my dad, for sure, because of that nice community that's there. And this is a sort of safety and security element. And it's simple, isn't it? You've got a smaller place to look after. It just does, the manageability is there. The bills are cheaper. All those it's just manageability of the home. And as you say, being able to lock up and leave and go to Spain for 6 months if you want to. Perfect. Right, so I think we've covered everything, Nicki. So thank you so much for being with us. That's given us a real great insight into the type of work that you do and what sort of things are necessary when someone's downsizing their home. So that's it for this episode. We hope you've all enjoyed listening and are inspired to take action. So is downsizing something that you're about to embark on for yourself, or something that you'll be getting involved with a family member soon? We hope we've given you some great advice today. Huge thanks to Nicki for taking the time out of her, I think it's fair to say, a very hectic schedule to talk to us today. So, Nicki, can you tell our listeners where they can find out more about the Senior Move Partnership or your company, All Organised?
Okay, so if you've got a move in Kent, you can contact us on www.all-organised.co.uk. That's our website, and there's a contact form and our telephone numbers. And if you have a national move and need assistance, it is info@moveseniors.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you. So thanks for taking the time to listen today. If you'd like to get more tips and advice, please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook as Declutter Hub. And we also have a lively, supportive Facebook group where we chat all things clutter. You can search for the Declutter Hub community. We would love to see you there. If you don't want to miss the next weekly episode of our podcast, subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Stitcher, and it will pop into your notifications each Friday. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration, and don't forget to tune in next week.